Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what are for me the greatest rock albums, metal albums and gigs and bands of all time, based on going to hundreds of gigs and listening to thousands of albums over many years. If you enjoy what you see, please press the red button to subscribe to see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. Today I will be talking about Whitesnake. I think you can see from the albums scattered around me that Whitesnake are one of my favourite bands. And today I will be featuring, or we'll be talking about the first time that I saw Whitesnake live, and also one of my favourite albums of theirs. My introduction to Whitesnake came in 1980 with a compilation album I've mentioned before that was called Axe Attack, released in the UK, maybe somewhere else as well, but I had the UK version. And one of the tracks on that compilation was Whitesnake's Ready and Willing, and that was the first time that I'd heard the band. So I investigated a little bit more and found that I really enjoyed the Whitesnake music. And I also learned for the first time that the singer, a guy by the name of David Coverdale, had also been in Deep Purple. Now, on the Axe Attack compilation, there was a Deep Purple song, but with Ian Gillan as a singer, and I didn't realise there had been another version of Purple. You have to remember, at this time I was still pretty young and just getting into rock and metal music and discovering it all. So for me, David Coverdale was Whitesnake. It took me a while before I found out about his Deep Purple history. So let's have a bit of history about Whitesnake. They were formed in 1978 after Deep Purple disbanded. They'd had some issues in the band, and so they kind of decided let's give it a break. So David Coverdale went off and formed Whitesnake, and actually it ended up that he had a couple of his Deep Purple pals, John Lord and Ian Pace, join him for a while in the band. The album that I'm going to talk about today is this album, released in 1984, and it's titled Slide It In. Plays a very important part in the history of Whitesnake, because it's what we call a transition album. You'd had the first era of Whitesnake, which was 78 up to 84, or 83 really, where Whitesnake were very much a real blues-based band. And then with 84's Slide It In album, there came a change, because we now started to see a mixture of the blues with a lot more of the heavy metal type of approach as well. So a mix of those two genres. And what was interesting about this particular album is that the first recording of it that was released was that it was the more blues-based type. But then Coverdale and the record company decided that they wanted to try and crack the American market, which had proved a little bit elusive. Now, at this point in the UK and Europe, Whitesnake were very big. And in fact, in 1983, they just headlined the Donington Rock Festival. So now they wanted to try and crack the States. And the way that they did this was they employed a new guitarist, a guy by the name of John Sykes, you see over here, and a new bass player, Neil Murray, over there. And they re-recorded the guitar and the bass for the album and created a brand new mix. It was a lot of a harder edge and took away a little bit of the bluesiness. And it worked. In the States, it proved to be a huge success. And unfortunately, their touring was cut short in the States. Coverdale had an illness, but it didn't stop the global, massive, and USA, European, all over the world success of their follow-up album, which was the self-titled Whitesnake album, which many now refer to as 1987, the year in which it was released. And then Whitesnake had a period of time where they were just huge all over the world. Today, they still continue to make music and play gigs, not at the level that they were, but still at a reasonable size. Over that period of time, since 1978 up to present day, Whitesnake have had 40 different band members, all focused around the main guy, David Coverdale. That's a crazy number of band members that have either played on their albums or played live with the band. That's a real rotating cast. Actually, the current lineup has been relatively stable now for I think probably about 5 years, something like that. Don't quote me on that. So, let's have a look at the 1984 album, Slide It In. This is the 35th anniversary edition. Now, I have never heard of a band do this. You had, as I've already mentioned, what many call the UK mix of the Slide It In album, first released in '84. Then closely following that was the USA mix, with Sykes and Murray contributing their guitar parts. Now, we have the 35th anniversary edition that features yet another new mix. And I believe that this mix is a mix that takes everything that they have, everything that was recorded by all the band members, and creates a brand new mix. And actually, it's fantastic. It really is fantastic. And we have this double album gatefold for the 35th anniversary, and it is pressed on very nice pressing actually on red vinyl, and it's pressed at 45 RPM to improve the sound quality even more, so you really cannot get better than this. And what an album! This is my favourite Whitesnake album, and this is why I'm featuring it today. It is just brilliant. For me, there is not a bad track on here, but if I had to pick my favourite 4, which I always do, I am going to go now. Also, I should mention on this 35th anniversary edition, which just reminded me as I looked at it, the order of the track listing is different as well from the original UK version. That's the one that was printed in my brain. So I was going to say that my first choice of track is the opening track, which on the original release was the track Gambler. Not on this release. But I'm going to talk about Gambler. Gambler is a great way to start an album, and that's why I'm surprised it's still not the introductory track on this release. It builds up with a beautiful keyboard intro that's getting louder and louder by the maestro, Mr. John Lord, who had previously been in Deep Purple and then subsequently rejoined Deep Purple. Unfortunately no longer with us, rest in peace Mr. Lord. And then it builds him into a great, brilliant rock song. Really gets you in the mood straight from the off. I've been a gypsy for 1,000 years, a victim of circumstance. Love it. Brilliant, brilliant song. That then leads to my next choice, which on the original version was the second track. On here it is the opening track, and it's the title track, Slide It In. One of the things that I do love about classic rock music, and certainly Whitesnake's brand of classic rock music, is something that you don't really get much of nowadays because it's considered too politically incorrect, and that is the sexual lyrics. And Mr. Coverdale is the master of creating the sexual innuendo lyrics, and Slide It In is a perfect example of that, with a brilliant chorus that's always a sing-along like, slide it in right to the top, slide it in, I ain't never gonna stop. Love it. Brilliant, brilliant song, brilliant lyrics. The next track I will choose is also a real showstopper live. Many would call it the quintessential Whitesnake track, and that is Love Ain't No Stranger. A brilliant vocal intro to this, which then kicks into a big monster rock song. Always a brilliant live track and brilliant on the album too. The final track is a perfect representation of the sound of this album. It was produced, if I remember rightly, and I can't find it here now, yes, it was produced by the legendary producer Martin Birch. And Martin Birch did a whole batch of legendary albums, probably most well known for the classic albums that he did with Iron Maiden. And the sound of this album is superb, and it is showcased brilliantly on the final track I would choose, Slow and Easy. And the drumming by the late great legendary Cozy Powell is highlighted perfectly on this track. A superb blues stomper, epic sing-along song, Slow and Easy. So they are my favourite four from, I can't say this enough, a brilliant, brilliant album. So now I'm going to talk about the first time that I saw Whitesnake live. But before I do that, it's time to take a look at rock t-shirts by the sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So my first experience of seeing Whitesnake live came on the tour that supported this album. It was at a gig at the NEC in Birmingham. Here is the ticket for the gig. You might see that the date has been crossed out. That's because it was to take place in '83, but the tour got pushed back into early '84. So it was 4th of March 1984 when I saw this, for the amazing bargain price of £6 English. I got to see Whitesnake, and you may also see the letter C. I was 3rd row. Whew! Amazing. And the support band for that gig was Great White, who'd had a few hits and were at that time an up-and-coming rock band who never really made it. They're still around today, or two versions of them are around today actually. One featuring the original singer and one featuring the original guitarist. They were okay, but for me it was all about Whitesnake that night. My first time seeing them, and I was so excited. Here's the original shirt that's been customized so it still fits me today, but you can't tell that. And what a gig. What a gig. It was great excitement to see them. And it was a slided-in tour. And most of the set list was made up of tracks from that album. I say most. I think it was 5 tracks from the album were played that night. And there were also a couple of tracks from the Saints and Sinners album and the Ready and Willing album. And they also played their big crowd sing-along, Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City, which is actually a cover version. Many people don't know that. And their big hit single that they had in 1981 closed out the show, which came from the Come and Get It album, which was Don't Break My Heart Again. So it was a great set list and a brilliant show, and it was the opportunity to see this lineup of the band. For me, actually, this was the greatest lineup of the band that had been. If we look at the musicians that are lined up there, Mel Galley, who doesn't get mentioned very much, but he was a brilliant songwriter in Whitesnake and a great guitarist as well. And we have the maestro on the keyboards, John Lord, of course singer David Coverdale, the monster drummer Cozy Powell, the new hotshot guitarist John Sykes, and at the end there their new bass player at the time, Neil Murray. It was a brilliant lineup of the band. Very different kind of lineup to that followed with their hair metal phase, but for me this was vintage Whitesnake, and it was a fantastic concert, and I'm so pleased to have had the opportunity to see Whitesnake in those days with literally, I mean, there are legendary musicians in that lineup at that time. So there you have it. That is my introduction to Whitesnake. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please press the red button to subscribe to see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal, and there will be future episodes on Whitesnake for sure. I will leave you with my favourite 4 albums. Now, Whitesnake have had 13 studio albums over their lifetime, and many compilation and live albums as well. In fact, down here you can see one of their latest compilation albums, which I would thoroughly recommend. It's called The Rock Album, and surprise, surprise, there's many remixed and remastered versions of old classics on here. Unfortunately, it doesn't go back to any albums prior to Slide It In, which is a shame because there's such classic songs on the older albums, and you see the older albums lined up here. But due to record company documents, etc., or whatever, contracts, that's the word I was looking for, their latest compilation only includes songs since the Slide It In album. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I was going to give you my favourite 4. Sorry. First one. If you want an introduction to old Whitesnake, vintage Whitesnake, this is the place to start. It's a live album, live in the heart of the city, and it's got a great selection of tracks from their older albums on there. So that's a great kind of live compilation to start you off on old Whitesnake. And this was actually the first album, the first Whitesnake album that I bought. After I'd heard that Ready and Willing track on the Axe Attack album, I bought this, which was also released in 1980. So that was my first album introduction to Whitesnake. Of course, I'm going to recommend Slide It In. Then I would recommend the album which is considered their classic album, really the 1987 album. Is it 1987 or is it self-titled Whitesnake? I'm not really sure about that. There's been some differing opinions on it. I think it's actually titled 1987. That's what it appears to be on here anyway. Enough about that. That's another pick that I would suggest. And bringing you up to more modern day Whitesnake, I would also recommend their last album, released 2018, I think. Don't quote me on that. The Flesh and Blood album. Okay, so that is showing that Whitesnake can still rock big time today. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, as always, we rock!